Hi. If you're autistic, it's a pretty safe bet that at some point you'll have been accused of black and white thinking by someone who doesn't seem to see shades of grey themselves, let alone the colours you see. Personally, I've found one of the most efficient ways of provoking such a response is by introducing someone to the concept of good bad news, or bad good news for that matter. I'm Quinn, and I'm autistic. And today on Autismatic, I'd like to sit back with a cuppa and have a chat about news that's both bad and good at the same time. Before I start, thanks to everyone who gave me feedback about the last video I put up. Obviously, I listened, and I'll tell you a little more about that at the end. I've been learning about autism through study and just being autistic ever since I was diagnosed 40 years ago, and I share some of what I've picked up here on Autismatic. I've started 3 scripts in the last 2 days, all of which pick up on themes I mentioned last week, and this makes a 4th, though this one was unexpected. What do I mean by good bad news? It's a phrase I always thought was self-explanatory, but over the years I came to understand that not everyone seems to get it. Or at least not everyone responds the same way. Good bad news, or its opposite number, bad good news, exists when someone gives you information that has 2 sides to it, sometimes with quite different implications. I received some good bad news myself earlier, so this is fresh in my mind right now. And this is one of those situations where I think almost anyone, neurodivergent, neuronormative, or neuronumpty, would get what I'm trying to explain. Someone very close to me, not my wife, but a very close friend, just received a scary diagnosis. Nobody of sound mind would consider what they were told good news. It's objectively bad, whichever way you look at it. But the prognosis is very optimistic. Nobody's talked statistics or percentages, and personally I'd rather they didn't, but the doctors don't expect complications and seem pretty confident that in a few weeks or months my friend will emerge with a clean bill of health. There are no guarantees, of course, and complications can happen, but confidence is high that they'll come out of this okay and back to their old selves. The diagnosis is without doubt bad news, but it's treatable and could be over within a matter of months. The undoubtedly bad diagnosis is tempered by the good prognosis. There's reason for optimism amongst the pain. But in order to understand that, to feel it, you have to take a step back and balance the situation in your own mind first. Do a little weighing up of pros and cons. And that's something that few people do in the heat of the moment. Unless you happen to be autistic. Like most of us, I learned this the hard way. Pardon me. I recently made a video about the double empathy problem, which garnered a bit of interest from folks who disagreed with Damien Milton's thesis that autistic people express empathy differently to neurotypical folks. One fascinating take on it, which caught my eye, was this one. Autistic people are dead behind the eyes, emotionless monsters who take delight in causing pain. Yeah, I know. Once I finished laughing at the hypocrisy of it, I did see a nugget of wisdom in there. Some good information in amongst all the bile and vitriol. That comment proves by its existence, as much as its words, that there are some folks who we'll never reach, and that's a valuable lesson for every autist to learn, one that took me way too long to get through my skull. Some people will never listen. It's a bitter pill to swallow, but a necessary one. For all that I can't help seeing every story from multiple angles and viewpoints, conducting a mini impact assessment and forecast on every word and gesture someone says, nobody else does. At least, that's how it seemed. Now I know so many neurodivergent people, I realise that it's not unique to me. It's common amongst those of us who break from the regular mould, and some neurotypical folks do it too. I often feel the need to mention that I've spoken to hundreds of autistic folks over the last 40 years in my efforts to understand what makes us tick, but I don't usually point out that there have been thousands of interactions with NT folks in the same time, and I ask them the same questions too. The example of my friend's scary diagnosis combined with the optimistic prognosis is a fitting illustration of what I mean by good, bad news. The overall news is bad, the diagnosis, but hidden within it is good news, that there's a clear path back to good health. Good news within the bad. So, good, bad news. You don't have to be neurodivergent to get that one. Most neurotypical folks would see that situation the same way. Maybe not at first, as I say, in the heat of the moment, but eventually they come round to seeing it in similar terms. By the same token, bad good news is good news that has a sting in the tail. Like being offered a free holiday to the destination of your dreams, but you have to spend it with someone you really don't like. Or the everyday bad good decisions most of us make when we spend our money on something we want, meaning we won't be able to afford something else. Bad good and good bad descriptors apply to both situations and decisions, and they're second nature to most of the neurodivergent people I've known. But when I've tried to explain it to neurotypical folks, the response often isn't always what I'd hoped for. In fact, it's occasionally one of incredulity, even horror. You see, most people don't bring it up most of the time when I do it. As I've grown older and my understanding of NT customs and behaviours has been refined, I'm much better at picking up the signals of irritation that come my way when I vocally evaluate the pros and cons of a given topic. But I do rarely get picked up on it. If it happens to you, I doubt it happens that often, but you'll know when it's coming. It'll be in the form of a phrase like, "Oh, for God's sake, Quinn, will you just get to the point?" Or, "Not everything is complicated, Quinn. Some things are just good or bad." Historically, I would try to explain my reasoning. I'd do my best to put into words the balancing act that goes on in my mind, weighing up the objective and the subjective ups and downs of the situational decision. It never went down well. Well, I say never. That's not strictly true. Sometimes people would wait patiently for me to explain, then just as patiently try to tell me that it was all well and good, but you just don't say those sort of things. They wouldn't often tell me why such things were verboten at the time, but at least they gave me the appearance of looking out for me and trying to prevent me from digging myself any deeper into the social mire. After the initial shock of bad or good news, most people find a way of balancing the situation so that they can deal with it. Where autistic folk seem to differ is that we have to do it in the here and now, whatever the emotional temperature. Excuse me. It shouldn't be a surprise then that many of the folks who've nodded and expanded on what I've said, or just agreed because they were thinking something similar, have later turned out to be neurodivergent themselves, or closely related to someone ND, or settled down with an ND partner. Make of that what you will. But then you get the angry ones, the ones who blow their top, and there's no reasoning with them, no placating them, no way of returning to a state of peace. They're the ones that can drive us to stress events. meltdowns and shutdowns. They want us to declare that their sad, frustrating, funny, or triumphant story is objectively and unanimously bad or good. Either they suffered the worst indignity, embarrassment, or pain, their story is the most puzzling or amusing, or their success eclipses other related triumphs in history. They will brook no caveats, no extenuating factors, no dilution of their emotional and socially relevant moment. I can only ever speak for myself for certain. But I rarely meet an autist who ever talks in terms of 100% anything. Unless you're talking about our special interests, but that's for another day. This good-bad trait is another of those which is so common amongst us, it could well be an inherent, born-with-it trait of autism. But it's also seen in Autistic and neurotypical folks as a personality trait derived from trauma. To give it a name, we're rationalising, and it's a trait some researchers have picked up on and run with. Straight into a brick wall, unfortunately, but they ran with it nonetheless in the form of the extreme male brain theory. The theory being that men rationalise more than women, and so autistic people must be very male. If we view autism through deficit-based, pathological eyes, as has historically been done, we see a people often paralysed with indecision, emotionally detached and avoidant of risk. If we turn that on its head, the non-autistic approach might be seen as impulsive, emotionally driven and ignorant of risk. So, why is anyone picking fault with anyone else over this? Clearly, the best way is a matter of perspective. Impulsiveness is not a fault in neurotypical psychology any more than it is for ADHDers. Or is their impulsivity excused somehow? Much as it's tempting to reflect the treatment we grew up with right back and be snobby about it, like we had some moral high ground, that's just us being just as ignorant, isn't it? Acting on impulse, listening to emotions over our reasoning, is just as much an adaptation to stress stimuli as the autistic balancing act. If it weren't for people with quick and emotional reactions like that, there probably wouldn't be a human race right now. There's absolutely no doubt to me, or most of the people watching this, that neurodivergent folks get a raw deal in most of the world, with or without a diagnosis. I concentrate on autism here, but I know plenty of ND folks with other diagnoses, and they all relate a lot to what I talk about on this channel. We're all agreed that the world would be a better, happier, and more productive place if neurodivergent people weren't ostracised, marginalised, and pathologised like we are now, and were instead welcomed as equal partners in society. When ND folks have had both talent and support, they've sometimes gone on to make huge contributions to human progress or culture, specifically because of their unique differences from the neurotypical mould. Back when human social groups were no more than a few related individuals travelling the savannas of Africa, we were far more reliant on each other. People like me who recognise patterns others didn't, put them together to learn how nature works, then how to predict it, starting us on the road to agriculture, technology and the strategies and plans that allowed us to thrive as a species. But you can't have innovative ideas if a saber-toothed tiger bites your head off first. Those small proto-societies couldn't survive without cooperation, which took advantage of everybody's skill sets and differences. The autistic kid with the oversensitive hearing who couldn't sleep at night would make an excellent lookout whilst the tribe slept, but he'd be useless without the quick, emotionally alert, maybe neurotypical guy sat next to them, spear at the ready. And neither of them would survive if the rest of the tribe didn't protect them while they both slept during the day. If we're to make the argument that the neurodivergent preference for balanced and informed evaluation is neurological and evolutionary in nature, then we're arguing the same for people who react emotionally and protectively. Those tribal days are only a few thousands of years behind us, so in evolutionary terms we're not just on the same page, we're still reading the same sentence. And since both considered and emotional approaches serve a useful purpose to the tribe, both are worthy of the same respect. When I'm faced with something stressful, whether it be bad news or a difficult decision, a logical process starts up in both my conscious and unconscious minds. Pretty much every autistic or neurodivergent person I've spoken to has described something similar, but they rarely work quite the same way. They're often tied to our thought styles. My friend Mike, Autistic AF, is more of a visual thinker than I am, so his process is passed differently to my verbal thinking approach, but the guts of the process is the same. We're looking beyond the immediate effects or causes of the dilemma at hand and searching for solutions. Along the way, we'll find partial solutions and we'll balance them, maybe vocalise them along the way. The overall dilemma may have a clear polarity, positive or negative, but there's a lot more going on when we think about it. We see extenuating factors, good that may come from the bad, or the opposite. More than once, I've been contacted by people who are in the midst of the whistleblower's dilemma. They've identified something bad hidden within something other people think is good and are burning themselves out trying to get people to see what they do. But nobody's listening to them. Being able to see the bad within the good and vice versa is a survival skill. But it's no less specific now than it was on the African savannah. We need both the cautious, considered understanding of the neurodivergent to predict disaster, but we also need the quick reactions, social awareness and sense of community of others to put those plans into action in the moment. The point I'm always trying to make here on Autismatic is that if you insist on taking sides, then don't kid yourself that your side is better or more deserving of being called normal than the other. Neither side would do better without the other. In fact, the idea that there are sides in the first place needs to be questioned. Neurodiversity shouldn't be a political talking point or a woke issue. It's as real and fragile as biodiversity. We are all equally valid expressions of humanity, but we're not doing a great job of recognising that on the whole, are we? This isn't about what's better or more appropriate. It's about respecting the needs of both parties in a two-way exchange and not imposing our needs at their expense. It's possible for both approaches to work symbiotically in the 21st century as it was 30,000 years ago under the African sun. We've just lost sight of that, thanks in part to a bit too much polarisation, a little bit too much me and not enough of us. What we think of as the neurotypical viewpoint, which is language none of us wants to be using and wouldn't be using if we hadn't been singled out as freaks in the first place. That neurotypical viewpoint has been mistakenly elevated to the status of aspiration, rather than just being the most common variation in a very diverse range. It takes all sorts for a society to thrive, yet we've marginalised and punished some of our most creative and innovative minds throughout history for the heinous trespass of inquiry and the mortal sin of seeking balance. One day, channels like this won't be needed anymore. But until then, we autists have to find ways of minimising the damage when misaligned needs and expectations bite us in the bum. Now, no two people or dilemmas are the same, but I often find the least destructive path is to say something along the lines of, "Sorry, I was thinking aloud," or "I beg your pardon, I'm just trying to make sense of it all." Make sure to get the sorry bit in first, of course. They don't always work, and it might still blow up in your face, but variations on those themes have diffused a few sticky situations for me. Try it out at your own risk, though. Things are rarely all good or all bad. The most evil of acts are often committed for selfish ends, so of course someone's benefiting. And sometimes the key to survival is knowing where those benefits end up. In the same way, it's worth knowing who or what pays the price for other people's success, including your own, and especially if it's you that success ends up trampling on. There is always good hidden in the bad, and seeing it is what makes it possible to get through the day sometimes. But spotting the bad hidden within the good will occasionally save your life. Nuanced thinking and the balancing of priorities and influences is an objectively useful skill to have when the circumstances permit. When they don't, it's handy to have someone around who doesn't stop to think too much about things to beat up the saber-toothed tigers. It is no easier for us autists to let go of our analytical survival traits than it is for an emotional, reactionary mind to let their guard down. But we could make allowances for each other. We could recognise how important we all are to humanity's survival, let alone the peace and prosperity we all seek. I'm Quinn, and I'm autistic. Thank you for watching. And here's the extra bit for regular viewers. I said at the beginning that this more relaxed format went down well enough last week that I'm doing it again this week, and that I'd say a bit more later. My personal life is a bit hectic right now, and there's a lot of extra work involved in building the channel into a viable business, so my creative time is limited right now. It's a bit frustrating when that creativity is, in effect, your product. This tea time format is an attempt to work smarter to free up more time to deal with the non-creative stuff, but also to do more writing. I have books to write as well as scripts and new relationships to forge for the future. But I also get a great satisfaction from making videos with a more entertaining and eye-catching vibe, and it's not just because I enjoy the end results myself. Those videos reach one of my target audiences much better than this relaxed format ever will. Autistic has always been as much about outreach and educating neurotypical folks about our lives and how our minds work as it is about helping other autists feel seen and understood. I firmly believe that most, not all, but most non-autistic folks would treat us better if we weren't such a mystery to them, and evidence keeps supporting that hypothesis, even just in my comment sections. The production values I decided to aim for when I started this channel had those casual internet passers-by in mind. Those viewers who won't stick around to watch a beardy old git whinge on about how life isn't fair, but might hang on long enough to learn something if the video is visually engaging and amusing enough. 6 years on from establishing that strategy, I've changed. YouTube has changed, and so has the audience. I've now got a pretty good, though not perfect, handle on which videos will attract a mainly neurodivergent audience and which will bring in the passers-by, so I'll see how dividing my time along those lines works for a while. I've got a lot coming up, so for the next few weeks, maybe a month or two, I'll be mainly doing tea time videos which won't be squarely aimed at reaching out to new people. They'll be like this, more intimate videos about more intimate topics. These will be more about community and catharsis than teaching an ignorant world about autism. Of course, everybody is welcome and may well learn something, but I won't be proving a point to the outside world for the next few weeks. More sharing a cup of tea with my neurodivergent peers and trying to make sense of something together. So, until next time, ta-ra! If you've already liked and subscribed and would like to support the channel more, then please follow the Patreon links in the description to pledge what you feel is fair and affordable to help keep the lights on here and the content keep flowing.